The diagnosis, the sterile scent of disinfectant filled Victoria Blackwood's nostrils as she sat on the examination table, her manicured fingers drumming nervously against the paper covering. Outside the window of Cedar Hills Medical Center, autumn. Leaves danced in the October wind, their vibrant reds and golds a stark contrast to the clinical white walls surrounding her. At 36, Victoria had always prided herself on her health. Regular yoga classes, organic meals, and an active lifestyle had kept her looking younger than her years. Her chestnut hair still gleamed with natural highlights, and her green eyes usually sparkled with vitality. But lately, something had been wrong. The persistent fatigue, the unexplained weight loss, the nagging pain in her abdomen that wouldn't disappear no matter how many over-the-counter remedies she tried. Dr. Patricia Wells entered the room with a manila folder tucked under her arm, her expression carefully neutral. Victoria had known Patricia since medical school. They'd been roommates at Columbia before Patricia specialized in oncology, and Victoria had chosen to focus on her family's philanthropic foundation instead of pursuing medicine. "Victoria," Dr. Wells said softly, pulling up a chair to sit directly across from her longtime friend. "I wish I had better news." Victoria's heart began to race, but she forced herself to remain composed. "How bad is it, Patricia?" "The biopsy results confirm our suspicions. It's pancreatic cancer, stage 4. It's already metastasized to your liver and lungs." Patricia's voice was gentle but clinical, the tone she'd perfected after years of delivering. "Devastating news to patients and their families." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She'd suspected cancer, had even mentally prepared herself for the diagnosis, but hearing it spoken aloud made it terrifyingly real. "How long do I have?" "With aggressive treatment, we might be able to give you 6 to 8 months. Without treatment..." Patricia paused, her professional mask slipping slightly. "Maybe 3 to 4 months." Victoria nodded slowly, absorbing the information with an odd sense of calm. Perhaps it was shock, or maybe some part of her had already known. "Does Marcus..." "No, I'm here today." Patricia frowned slightly. "Isn't he coming? You mentioned he'd be joining us for the results." A bitter smile crossed Victoria's lips. "He had an important business meeting. Something about a new hotel development downtown that couldn't wait." She looked down at her wedding ring, a stunning 5-carat diamond that had once symbolized eternal love, but now felt heavy and cold against her finger. "Victoria, you shouldn't be alone for this. Let me call Grace, or..." "No," Victoria interrupted firmly. "Not yet. I need time to process this myself first." She slid off the examination table, her movements deliberate and controlled. "What kind of treatment are we talking about?" Dr. Wells outlined the treatment options: chemotherapy, radiation, experimental trials. Each option came with its own set of brutal side effects and diminishing returns. Victoria listened intently, asking detailed questions about timelines, success rates, and quality of life implications. "I'll need to discuss this with Marcus," Victoria said finally, though even as she spoke the words, she wondered if her husband would be present enough to have such a conversation. Over the past year, Marcus had become increasingly distant, buried. In his work as a real estate developer, their conversations had dwindled to logistics about social events and household matters. Of course. But Victoria, don't wait too long to make a decision. Time is not something we have in abundance here. As Victoria left the medical center, she tried calling Marcus. The phone went straight to voicemail. She tried again 20 minutes later with the same result. Finally, she sent a text. "Need to talk tonight. Something important." His response came 3 hours later. "Big day tomorrow. Can it wait until the weekend?" Victoria stared at the message, feeling something inside her chest tighten. She was dying, and her husband couldn't spare an evening to talk to her. She thought about the beautiful life they'd built together, The penthouse overlooking the city, the house in the Hamptons, the carefully curated social circle of successful couples. But when had they stopped being partners and become merely co-inhabitants of an elegant life? That evening, Marcus came home after 10 o'clock, smelling of expensive cologne and claiming he'd been entertaining potential investors. He barely looked at Victoria as he headed straight for his home office, mumbling something about reviewing contracts. Victoria sat alone in their living room, staring out at the city lights below, her diagnosis weighing on her like a stone. For the first time since receiving the news, she allowed herself to cry, not just for the life she was losing, but for the marriage that had apparently died long before her body began to fail. Tomorrow, she decided, she would begin treatment. But tonight, she would mourn not only her future, but the realization that the man she'd loved for 15 years had already moved on without her. The plan Victoria threw herself into orchestrating her final act with the same meticulous attention to detail she'd once applied to her charitable foundation work. Every element had to be perfect, every contingency planned for, every loose end tied up with precision. Harold Morrison proved to be an invaluable ally in this endeavor. The elderly attorney had served Victoria's family for over 30 years and had watched her grow from a privileged but kind-hearted child into a woman of substance. When she explained what she wanted to do, his eyes gleamed with what might have been admiration. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said quietly. "She always believed that actions should have consequences." Victoria's plan was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its scope. Using Rebecca Chen's thorough documentation of Marcus's financial theft, she began systematically reclaiming everything he'd stolen. Bank accounts were frozen, property transfers were reversed, and fraudulent transactions were meticulously traced. The centerpiece of her strategy involved her grandmother's antique mirror, a Victorian piece with an ornate silver frame that had been passed down through 3 generations of strong women. Victoria's grandmother had used it to prepare for suffrage rallies. Her mother had looked into it before making the difficult decision to leave an abusive first husband. Now it would serve one final purpose. "I want him to see himself clearly," Victoria explained to Grace as they sat in the penthouse one afternoon. Victoria's appearance had deteriorated significantly. Her weight had dropped to barely 90 pounds, and the scarf covering her bald head couldn't disguise how gaunt her face had become. But her eyes burned with fierce determination. "Are you sure this isn't just revenge?" Grace asked gently. "Because revenge won't heal you, Victoria. It won't bring back what you've lost." Victoria considered this carefully. "Maybe it started as revenge," she admitted, "but it's become something more. It's about justice. It's about making sure that when I'm gone, there's a record of what he did. And maybe, just maybe, it's about giving him a chance to become better than he is." The legal framework took weeks to establish. Victoria restructured her entire estate, ensuring that every dollar Marcus had stolen would go to cancer research, domestic violence shelters, and children's charities. The apartment he'd bought for himself and Natalie would be sold, with the proceeds funding a scholarship program for young women pursuing careers in medicine. But Victoria saved the most poetic justice for last. She arranged for Marcus to receive one final gift, something that would force him to confront the truth about what he'd become. Meanwhile, Marcus and Natalie were living in their downtown apartment, apparently oblivious to the storm gathering around them. Rebecca's surveillance reports showed them dining at expensive restaurants, taking weekend trips to the Hamptons house, which Marcus didn't yet realize he no longer owned, and generally behaving like a couple who'd successfully eliminated an inconvenient obstacle. "They're planning a wedding," Rebecca reported during one of her visits to Victoria. "Natalie's been looking at venues. She told the wedding planner that you're expected to pass away soon, and they want to have a celebration of their new beginning afterward." Victoria absorbed this information without flinching. She'd moved beyond hurt into a realm of cold, calculated justice. How thoughtful of them to plan ahead. As December approached, Victoria's condition deteriorated rapidly. Dr. Wells made it clear that she had weeks, not months, left. But Victoria refused to enter hospice care or accept pain medications that would cloud her thinking. She had work to finish. Her final video message took 3 attempts to record. The first 2 times, Victoria had broken down, not from sadness, but from fury at the waste of it all. The years of marriage that had been a lie. The love she'd given to a man who'd seen her only as a means to an end. The child she'd lost while he was building a new life. But in the 3rd recording, she found her voice, clear, strong, and utterly unforgiving. "Marcus," she said to the camera, "if you're watching this, then everything has gone according to plan. You thought you were so clever, didn't you? Stealing from your dying wife, building a future on the foundation of my suffering. But you forgot something important. I come from a family of strong women, and we don't go quietly into the night." The video lasted nearly 20 minutes. Victoria detailed every betrayal, every theft, every moment of cruelty she'd endured. But more than that, she spoke about the man Marcus used to be, or the man she'd thought he was. "I loved you once," she concluded, completely and without reservation. "I would have given you anything, forgiven you anything. But you chose to take instead of ask, to steal instead of share, to abandon instead of cherish. Now you'll have to live with the consequences of those choices." On December 15th, Victoria called Marcus for the last time. He answered on the 4th ring, sounding irritated. "What is it, Victoria? I'm busy." "I'm dying, Marcus. Tonight, probably. I thought you should know." There was a long pause. Then, "Do you want me to come over?" Victoria almost laughed at the question. "No, I just wanted to say goodbye and to thank you." "Thank me? For showing me who you really are before it was too late to do something about it." She hung up before he could respond. Outside her window, snow was beginning to fall on the city, covering the world in pristine white. It seemed fitting somehow, a clean slate for whatever came next. Victoria died peacefully in her sleep that night, with Grace holding her hand and her grandmother's mirror wrapped carefully in tissue paper, waiting to deliver its final message. Part 5. The Reckoning. The funeral was exactly what Victoria had specified in her detailed instructions. A celebration of a life well lived, held at St. Mark's Cathedral with white roses and her favorite classical music. The church was packed with friends, colleagues from her charitable work, medical professionals who'd fought alongside her, and distant relatives who'd traveled from across the country. Marcus arrived 20 minutes late, looking polished and appropriately somber in a black suit that still carried department store tags. Natalie had the audacity to accompany him, though she at least had the sense to sit in the back, trying to blend in with the other mourners. During the service, Marcus delivered a eulogy that would have been worthy of an Academy Award. He spoke of Victoria's courage, her kindness, her unwavering strength in the face of adversity. He painted himself as the devoted husband who'd stood by her side through every difficult moment. "Victoria was the love of my life," he declared from the pulpit, his voice breaking with manufactured emotion. "She faced her illness with such grace, such dignity. I was privileged to be her partner in this fight." In the front row, Grace's hands clenched into fists. Harold Morrison, seated beside her, wore an expression that might have been a smile. After the burial, Marcus seemed almost cheerful. He shook hands with mourners, accepted condolences with practiced humility, and even managed to look tearful when Victoria's elderly aunts embraced him. As the crowd dispersed, he was already making plans with Natalie for their future. "We should wait a few months before the wedding," he said as they walked to his car. "For appearance's sake. But maybe we can take that trip to Europe we talked about. We can afford it now. 3 days later, Harold Morrison's secretary called with the request that Marcus attend the reading of Victoria's will. The appointment was set for the following Monday, and Marcus was instructed to come alone. Marcus arrived at the law office in high spirits, wearing his most expensive suit and carrying himself with the confidence of a man expecting to inherit millions. He'd already begun making mental plans for how he'd spend Victoria's fortune. Perhaps a larger apartment, maybe a vacation home in the Caribbean, definitely a new car. The conference room was imposing, with its dark wood paneling and floor-to-ceiling law books. Grace was already there, along with a court stenographer and a videographer, details that should have worried Marcus but didn't. "Before we begin," Harold said, adjusting his glasses, "Mrs. Blackwood left explicit instructions that these proceedings be recorded in their entirety." Marcus waved dismissively. "Of course. Shall we get started?" Harold opened an elegant leather portfolio and began reading. The initial bequests were small: jewelry to cousins, books to friends, donations to various charities. Marcus listened impatiently, waiting for the main event. Then Harold cleared his throat. "As to the remainder of my estate, including all funds inherited from my grandmother's trust, all properties purchased with said funds, and all investments made therewith." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes bright with anticipation. "I hereby bequeath the entirety of these assets, valued at approximately $6 million, to be distributed equally among the following organizations: the American Cancer Society, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and the Children's Medical Research Foundation." The color drained from Marcus's face. "What? That's impossible." "She can't." "Furthermore," Harold continued, "I direct that all properties purchased with my inheritance, including the apartment at 450 West Broadway, be liquidated immediately, with proceeds going to the aforementioned charities." Marcus shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous. I'm her husband. That money was meant for me." "Please sit down, Mr. Blackwood. We're not finished." With shaking hands, Marcus sank back into his chair as Harold produced a cream-colored envelope. "To my husband." The discovery. 3 weeks into Victoria's chemotherapy treatments, the side effects hit her with brutal force. Her once lustrous chestnut hair began falling out in clumps, her skin took on a greyish pallor, and the nausea was so severe that she could barely keep water down. Through it all, Marcus maintained his pattern of convenient absences. "Another client dinner," he'd say, adjusting his tie in their bedroom mirror. "The Peterson deal is worth millions, Victoria, you understand." But Victoria was beginning to understand. Something else entirely. The way Marcus's phone buzzed constantly, with messages he'd quickly hide. The new cologne that seemed oddly feminine. The credit card statements showing charges at restaurants she'd never been to and jewelry stores she'd never visited. Her sister Grace had been begging her to hire help. Someone to drive her to treatments, assist with household tasks, provide companionship during the long, painful days. When Marcus suggested they interview candidates, Victoria agreed, curious to see what kind of person he might recommend. Natalie Pierce arrived for the interview looking like she'd stepped out of a fitness magazine. Tall, athletic, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and the kind of smile that belonged in a toothpaste commercial, she claimed to be a licensed physical therapist specializing in cancer patient care. "I believe in taking a holistic approach to healing," Natalie explained, her voice warm and professional. "Mind, body, and spirit working together." Marcus, who had been notably absent from Victoria's medical appointments, suddenly found time to sit in on the interview. Victoria watched with growing suspicion as he hung on Natalie's every word, his eyes lingering on her in ways that made Victoria's stomach churn, though that might have been the chemotherapy. "She seems perfect," Marcus declared after Natalie left. "Very knowledgeable." Victoria hired Natalie, but not for the reasons Marcus assumed. Something about the woman felt calculated, rehearsed. The way she'd asked detailed questions about Victoria's family trust fund during what should have been a discussion about medical care. The way she'd exchanged a barely perceptible look with Marcus when she thought Victoria wasn't paying attention. Within a week of Natalie starting work, Victoria made a decision that would change everything. She called Rebecca Chen, a private investigator recommended by her attorney. Rebecca was a former police detective with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. "I need to know what my husband is doing when he's not with me," Victoria explained, during their confidential meeting at a small cafe across town. "And I want to know everything about our new employee, Natalie Pierce." Rebecca's investigation moved with startling efficiency. Within 10 days, she presented Victoria with a comprehensive file that made her blood run cold. Photographs showed Marcus and Natalie at expensive restaurants, entering hotels together, shopping for jewelry at Cartier. But it was the financial records that truly devastated Victoria. Marcus had been systematically draining her trust fund, money left to her by her grandmother worth nearly $6 million. Bank transfers showed regular payments to various accounts, including one in Natalie's name. Property records revealed that Marcus had purchased a luxury apartment downtown, listed under both his and Natalie's names. "There's more," Rebecca said, grimly sliding another document across the table. "Natalie Pierce isn't a licensed physical therapist. Her credentials are fake. She's actually a former cocktail waitress who met your husband at a hotel bar 8 months ago, right around the time of your initial diagnosis." Victoria stared at the evidence, feeling something inside her break. Not just her heart, but something deeper. Her faith in the man she'd loved for 15 years, her belief in the life they'd built together. "How long have they been planning this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Based on the financial timeline, it appears they began moving money within weeks of your diagnosis. The apartment lease was signed 2 months ago." That night, Victoria confronted Marcus directly. She waited until Natalie had left after her evening session, then placed the photographs on the dining room table where Marcus would see them when he came home. He walked in at nearly midnight, saw the images, and went completely still. For a moment, Victoria thought he might deny everything, might fight for their marriage, might show some remorse for what he'd done. Instead, Marcus's expression hardened. "How long have you known?" "Does it matter?" Victoria asked, studying her husband's face. She was searching for some sign of the man she'd married, some flicker of shame or regret. She found none. "This doesn't change anything," Marcus said coldly. "You're dying, Victoria. Was I supposed to die with you?" His words hit her like physical blows. Victoria realized that the man standing before her was a stranger, someone who had been wearing Marcus's face while systematically betraying everything they'd once shared. "Get out," she whispered. "This is my house too." "No," Victoria said, her voice growing stronger. "It's my house, bought with my money, just like everything else in your life." She stood up slowly, chemotherapy weakened but filled with a cold, clear fury. "Get out and take your girlfriend with you." As Marcus packed a bag, Victoria made another call to Rebecca Chen. "I need you to document everything," she said. "Every transaction, every lie, every moment of this betrayal. I'm going to need proof of all of it, because Victoria Blackwood was dying, but she was not going quietly." Part 3. The pregnancy. 2 days after Marcus moved out, Victoria discovered something that changed everything. She'd been experiencing unusual nausea, different from her chemotherapy side effects, and a strange intuition had prompted her to take a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines appeared, clear and undeniable. Victoria stared at the test in her bathroom, her hands trembling. At 36, with advanced cancer and aggressive chemotherapy treatments, pregnancy should have been impossible. Dr. Wells had warned her that the medications would likely affect her fertility, possibly permanently. Yet here she was, carrying Marcus's child, while he was building a new life with another woman. The irony was devastating. For years, she and Marcus had tried to have children. They'd undergone fertility treatments, suffered through miscarriages, and eventually accepted that parenthood might not be in their future. Now, when Victoria was dying and their marriage was destroyed, life had decided to offer this cruel gift. Grace found her sister sitting on the bathroom floor an hour later, still holding the pregnancy test. "Oh, Victoria," Grace whispered, sinking down beside her. At 33, Grace had always been the practical one, the sister who solved problems while Victoria dreamed big dreams. But even Grace seemed stunned by this development. "I can't tell him," Victoria said quietly. "I won't give him the satisfaction of thinking this changes anything. But it's his child too." "Is it?" Victoria's voice turned bitter. "The man I married wouldn't have stolen from me while I was dying. The man I married wouldn't have replaced me before I was even in the ground. That man is gone, Grace. This stranger who looks like Marcus doesn't deserve to know." Dr. Wells delivered the crushing news with characteristic gentleness but unflinching honesty. Continuing the pregnancy would require stopping several of Victoria's cancer treatments. Without those treatments, her life expectancy would drop from months to weeks. "There's a small chance the baby could survive if we can get you to 24 weeks, Patricia explained. "But Victoria, carrying this pregnancy that far would almost certainly cost you your life much sooner than the cancer alone would." Victoria placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "What would you do?" "I can't make that decision for you. But I will say this. You have the right to choose what happens to your body, regardless of what anyone else might think or want." That evening, Victoria sat in her empty penthouse, surrounded by the life she and Marcus had built together. Wedding photos smiled down at her from the mantelpiece, images of a younger couple who'd believed in forever. The silence was broken only by the sound of her phone buzzing with messages from Natalie, who apparently didn't know she'd been fired. "Mrs. Blackwood, I haven't heard from you about tomorrow's session. I hope you're feeling well." Victoria deleted the message without responding. Natalie's fake concern felt like salt in an open wound. 3 days later, the stress of keeping the pregnancy secret while dealing with Marcus's betrayal took its toll. Victoria began experiencing severe cramping and bleeding. Grace rushed her to the hospital, where Dr. Wells confirmed what Victoria already knew in her heart. "I'm sorry," Patricia said softly. "You've lost the baby." Victoria closed her eyes, feeling a grief so profound it seemed to hollow her out completely. She mourned not just for the child she'd lost, but for the family that would never be, for the future that had been stolen from all of them. Marcus never knew about the pregnancy, never knew that while he was buying diamond earrings for Natalie, his wife was carrying his child, never knew that his betrayal had contributed to the loss of the son or daughter he'd never have the chance to meet. But Victoria knew, and in her grief, she began to plan something that would ensure Marcus understood the true cost of his choices. "I want to change my will," she told her attorney, Harold Morrison, during a meeting the following week. "I want to make sure Marcus gets exactly what he deserves."